1. A summary of the history of philosophy. The history of philosophy begins with an objective arche and ends with a subjective arche. An objective arche, truth or principle, is one that is outside the knower, while a subjective arche is inside the knower and is consciousness or thought itself. In the ancient and medieval periods, there are only objective arches, while in the modern period, beginning with Descartes, a subjective arche makes its appearance. Philosophy, or reason's primary activity and impulse, is to bring the manifold or the infinite multiplicity found in experience into unity and into a single system in which all parts are interconnected, forming a whole of knowledge, i.e., self-knowledge. Philosophy, the genesis of absolute science, begins in the ancient period with the Greeks, with the search for the arche, the eternal principle of everything. That is, in 600 BC, with Thales teaching that, quote, everything is water, water being Thales' arche, i.e., only one thing exists, having no beginning and no ending. With Plato, the Republic and the divided line, where the cave is, quote, meaningless illusion, we have as Plato's arche the good, which is, quote, the ground and cause of everything. While with Aristotle, the arche is the unmoved mover, i.e., God, as, quote, thought, eternally thinking itself, end quote. However, the Greeks reached only an objective arche, one outside themselves, not a subjective arche. During the medieval period of theology, God was the arche, one and infinite, however, existing outside us and objective. Hence, duality and separation prevailed, and no unity. We then advance from Augustine and Aquinas to the Renaissance and Reformation to the modern period and subjectivity, where philosophy comes to an end with absolute science, which began with Descartes' 1641 Meditations and his famous turn to the subject and consciousness away from the object, and his declaration, quote, I think, therefore I am, meaning that consciousness and being are one and inseparable. Cf., quote, before Abraham was, I am, end quote. But Descartes reached only a finite I, or consciousness, because he posited entities outside the cogito, whereas the German idealists reached an infinite or absolute I, that is, a self or cogito as all reality. In brief, absolute science began with Kant's 1781 Critique of Pure Reason and his discovery of space and time as grounded in ourselves and the transcendental unity of apperception, that is, self-grounded self-consciousness, which Fichte renamed the absolute I, the true arche of absolute science, which, as he says, quote, is all that ever was, is, and will be, end quote. Fichte also added a transcendental idealism or science of spirit. Schelling's contribution to scientific philosophy was the philosophy or science of nature, while Hegel's singular achievement was an introduction to science and a science of logic. The absolute I becoming the absolute concept, the one true arche. The concept was the fulfillment and realization of Aristotle's God as noesis noesios, or the thought of thought. Two important points. One, it is only in the science of logic, i.e. as fully and historically actualized, that absolute freedom exists for the first time. For only here do we have a perfect correspondence of concept, thought, and object, thought, which you do not have in art, as its object is sensuous, or religion, as its object is representational or pictorial. Two, many Hegel scholars believe it is Hegel's view that philosophy and its history does not come to an end with his philosophy, with absolute knowledge and absolute science. This is contradicted by many of Hegel's statements. For example, quote, it may seem as if this progression, the history of philosophy, were to go on forever, but it has an absolute end in view, namely absolute knowledge, end quote. From his lectures on the history of philosophy, translated by Haldane and Simpson, volume 135, cf. my article, quote, does philosophy end with Hegel, end quote. For a more detailed account of the history of philosophy, please see the Jedi Handbook, pages 35 to 71, and see especially 480 to 482 for an assessment of philosophy after Hegel.